Single dad Janitor ignored the guard's orders. But he was the only one who could save her. The fluorescent lights of Memorial. Hospital's third floor flickered at 11:47 p.m., casting dancing shadows across Miguel Santos's weathered hands as he wrung out his mop for what felt like the 1,000th time that night. His back ached, his feet throbbed, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear his supervisor barking orders at the cleaning crew. But Miguel had learned long ago that physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the weight of a father's worry, the kind that kept him working double shifts just to afford his daughter Sophia's asthma medication and the new winter coat she desperately needed for school. Most people walked past Miguel without a second glance. To them, he was invisible, just another janitor pushing a cart through hospital corridors, cleaning up after other people's emergencies while nursing his own quiet struggles. But what they couldn't see was the heart beating beneath his worn uniform, a heart that still remembered what it meant to show up for someone when the whole world looked away. Miguel's journey to America hadn't been easy. 6 years ago, he'd left everything behind in Guatemala after his wife passed away, determined to give 8-year-old Sophia a chance at a better life. Now 14, she was the reason he endured the night shifts, the condescending remarks, and the endless hours on his feet. Every dollar he earned mopping floors was a dollar toward her future, toward the community college tuition he was slowly saving for, toward proving that a janitor's work had just as much dignity as anyone else's. Tonight started like any other. Miguel clocked in at 11 p.m., collected his supplies, and began his rounds on the third floor, the oncology wing. He'd always found this floor the hardest to clean. The silence here felt different, heavier, punctuated by the steady beep of machines and the occasional sob filtering through closed doors. It was where hope and heartbreak lived side by side, where families whispered prayers in waiting rooms, where some people fought their last battles. As Miguel pushed his cart past room 304, he noticed something unusual. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear a woman's labored breathing, followed by a weak, desperate voice calling out, "Help, please. Someone help me." He paused, his hand tightening on the mop handle. Protocol was clear. Janitorial staff weren't supposed to enter patient rooms unless specifically requested by medical personnel. They certainly weren't supposed to respond to patient calls. That was what the nurse call button was for. Miguel glanced down the hallway, spotting Marcus, the security guard, stationed at his usual post near the elevators. Miguel approached him. "Marcus, I think someone in 304 needs help. Should I get a nurse?" Marcus barely looked up from his phone. "Not your job, Santos. Keep cleaning. The nurses do their rounds. If she needed help, she'd have pushed her button." "But I heard her calling—" "I said it's not your job," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp. "You want to keep this job? Stay in your lane. Clean the floors, empty the trash, and don't touch anything else. Last thing this hospital needs is a lawsuit because the janitor played doctor." Miguel felt the familiar sting of dismissal, the reminder that his opinion didn't matter, that he was just the help. He nodded slowly and returned to his cart. But that voice, so fragile, so afraid, echoed in his mind. He mopped mechanically, moving closer to room 304. And there it was again. "Please, can't breathe." His daughter's face flashed before his eyes. He remembered the night Sophia had her first severe asthma attack. How terrified he'd been, how every second without help had felt like an eternity. He remembered thinking, "Please, God, let someone hear her. Let someone care enough to help." Miguel set down his mop. Some rules were meant to be broken. He pushed open the door to 304 and found Eleanor Richardson, a 73-year-old woman struggling to breathe. Her oxygen mask had slipped off, the tube kinked and twisted. Her face was turning blue, and her eyes were wide with panic. The nurse call button lay on the floor out of reach, where it had apparently fallen when she'd thrashed in distress. It's okay," Miguel said softly, rushing to her side. He'd learned basic first aid years ago when Sophia was diagnosed with asthma. He'd made it his mission to understand what to do in emergencies. His hands worked quickly, straightening the oxygen tube and carefully replacing the mask on Eleanor's face. He elevated her head slightly with an extra pillow, remembering that positioning mattered for breathing difficulties. Within seconds, color began returning to her cheeks. Her breathing, while still labored, grew steadier. Miguel pressed the call button repeatedly and stayed by her side, holding her trembling hand. "You're going to be fine," he whispered. "Help is coming. Just keep breathing, slow and steady, in and out. That's it." 45 seconds later, 2 nurses burst through the door, followed by a doctor. They immediately took over, checking Eleanor's vitals, adjusting her oxygen flow and asking what happened. I couldn't breathe," Eleanor gasped between breaths. "Everything went wrong. So fast. He saved my life." The nurses looked at Miguel with surprise, then gratitude. But their response was quickly overshadowed by Marcus storming into the room. "What the hell are you doing in here, Santos? I told you to stay out of patient rooms." His face was red with anger. "You're not authorized to touch patients. Do you understand the liability?" "He saved her life," one of the nurses interrupted firmly. "Another minute and we'd have been calling a code blue." "I don't care," Marcus shot back. "He violated protocol. This is a fireable offense." Miguel's heart sank. He thought of Sophia, of the bills piled on their small kitchen table, of how hard it would be to find another job that paid enough to survive in this expensive city. But even as fear gripped him, he didn't regret his choice. He couldn't. That was someone's mother, grandmother, someone whose life mattered. "Then fire me," Miguel said quietly. "But I couldn't let her die. I wouldn't be able to live with myself." The doctor, a woman in her 50s named Dr. Patterson, stepped forward. "Actually, Marcus, you won't be firing anyone. This man did exactly what any decent human being should do. He recognized an emergency and responded appropriately." She turned to Miguel. "What's your name?" "Miguel Santos, ma'am." "Well, Miguel Santos, you have better instincts than half the first-year residents I supervise. Where did you learn to handle an oxygen crisis?" "My daughter has asthma," he explained simply. "I learned everything I could to keep her safe." Over the next hour, as Eleanor stabilized, the story spread through the hospital. By morning, Miguel's supervisors had called him into the administrative office, and he prepared himself for the worst. Instead, he found Eleanor's son, James Richardson, a prominent attorney in the city, waiting there with the hospital administrator. "Mr. Santos," James began, his voice thick with emotion, "you saved my mother's life. When I think about what could have happened if you hadn't been there, if you hadn't cared, enough to break the rules," he couldn't finish the sentence. The administrator cleared her throat. "Mr. Santos, we owe you an apology. We've created an environment where our staff feel they can't respond to emergencies because they're afraid of overstepping. That changes today. We'd also like to discuss your future with Memorial Hospital." 3 weeks later, Miguel started his new position as a patient care technician. With full benefits, paid training, and a salary that meant Sophia could get everything she needed. The hospital had created a new protocol named Miguel's Rule. Any staff member who witnessed a patient in distress was not only permitted but encouraged to provide immediate assistance regardless of their job title. Eleanor recovered fully and became a regular visitor to the hospital, not as a patient but as a volunteer. She and Miguel developed a deep friendship, and she insisted on meeting Sophia, the daughter who had indirectly saved her life by teaching her father compassion. On a sunny Saturday afternoon 6 months later, Miguel stood in the hospital's community room as Eleanor presented him with a scholarship fund she'd established in his name, one that would pay for Sophia's entire college education and help other children of hospital workers pursue their dreams. "You saw a human being in distress and chose kindness over self-preservation," Eleanor said, her voice strong and clear. "In a world that often tells us to mind our own business, to stay in our lane, to protect ourselves first, you reminded us what we're really here for, to take care of each other." As Miguel hugged his daughter, tears streaming down his face, he thought about that night and the choice he'd made. He'd ignored orders because his heart wouldn't let him do otherwise. He'd risked everything because, in the end, another person's life mattered more than his fear. In the audience, even Marcus, the security guard, sat with tears in his eyes, having learned that the measure of a person has nothing to do with their job title and everything to do with their character. Sometimes the real heroes aren't the ones wearing capes or holding degrees. Sometimes they're the ones holding mops and carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders, who still find the strength to lift others up. Miguel Santos was proof that it only takes one person choosing compassion to change everything, One person, refusing to look away when someone needs help. One person brave enough to remember that before we are janitors or doctors, guards or patients, we are all simply human beings deserving of dignity, respect, and care.